morning, and good afternoon to in-house counsel and in-house legal professionals from all across North America and the world. Welcome to In-House Connect, and shout out. I see we have Ocean County, we have Minnesota, we have Lisbon, Portugal, wonderful, upstate New York, Philly, Burlington. All right, wonderful, wonderful. Welcome one and all to In-House Connect. My name is Shai Mahani. I'm the CEO and co-founder of In-House Connect. I'm thrilled to have you here with us today. Thank you for spending your breakfast time or your lunchtime with us, and special thanks to our sponsor, Recital, and our fantastic presenters today, Martin Erdl and Ashlee Best, who are going to teach us how to simplify our contract repositories and share proven strategies and innovative tech for storing and managing contracts. This is our 86th event of the year, and I'm wondering, are you here for the first time or have you tuned in to an IHC webinar before? We're thrilled to have with us today Martin Erdl and Ashlee Best. I'll start with Ashlee. Ashlee Best is the Managing Director of Compass Legal Operations and Wellness, drawing from over 20 years of experience working with legal teams from organizations including Asana, Dropbox, Pandora, Zynga, and Oracle. As legal operations expert and a certified wellness coach, she is passionate about transforming the legal workplace. She focuses on building efficient, people-centered legal departments and empowering teams to thrive at the intersection of technology, collaboration, and wellness. And joined by Ashlee is Martin Erdl. Martin is the co-founder and CEO of Recital, a platform built to simplify contract management by making it easy for in-house counsel to quickly find the documents and information they need. Previously, he founded Contractually, which brought contracts to the cloud. Contractually was later acquired by Coupa, where Martin spent 3 years as general manager. He's a former DLA Piper and general counsel. He is passionate about developing tools that reduce the time legal teams spend on tedious tasks, helping them focus on higher value work. It is wonderful to have you both here, Martin and Ashlee. Welcome to In-House Connect. Martin, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Shai, and thank you for that very warm introduction. I'm super excited to be here. As Shai touched on, I am a lawyer by background, and I actually love lawyers, and I love the value that they can bring. And my mission in legal technology, in particular now with Recital, is to enable lawyers to provide their most valuable work by taking away all the drudgery that they have to deal with. So that'll be a big topic of discussion today. And Ashlee, thank you very much for joining us. You and I have spoken many times over the last couple of years. You're one of the first people that we spoke with as we set out on our journey to address the problems that we're going to be talking about today. Let's jump right in. We've got a little bit of an overall agenda here, and want to get started with a quick poll to set the tone for what we're going to talk about today. And that poll is, where do you currently store your contracts?
All right. So where do you currently store your contracts? Do you have a CLM or contract management software? Is it in the cloud somewhere, a shared server, all over the place, or somewhere else? Maybe file cabinets. Those are still in effect, believe it or not. So feel free to let us know. And thank you. I'd love to see some more networking. So Jen, thank you, Jen, for getting us started. And I see Christy also as well. So I love the networking. Keep it coming. And Alessandro, great as well. So keep that coming. Looks like we have about 70 of the people have answered, and it looks like there's 3 main winners here. So number 1 is all over the place with 35%. Number 2 is a close second. This is like really tied for second. The second place, 27% of the people have a CLM or contract management software, and then followed by 24% use cloud storage for their contracts. And then we have a 12% with shared server. Sure, your IT teams love to see that. Again, all over the place is 1, CLM is 2, and then cloud storage is 3. And then Anne is saying mostly 1 and 2, but still healthy amount of outliers. So all over the place. Thank you, Anne. Over to you, Martin.
Thanks, Shai. Ashlee, when I see those results, that seems pretty representative of the kinds of things that I know you've run into. Any quick thoughts on that?
Yeah, I just appreciate everybody's honesty. I made a note they're all over the place. That's also been my experience. And I just had a thought of curiosity pop up for the folks that said it's in their CLM. It made me wonder if the CLM was sitting on top of cloud storage and if they only had one CLM. So that's what came to mind when I saw those results.
And we're going to talk more about that because that's a pretty common situation where there's multiple places and that can create some confusion. Let's move to our first big topic today, why you even need an organized and centralized repository. And I thought I'd introduce this with an illustration of what life is often like for in-house counsel without a repository, without a proper repository. And this shows that one of the big issues for legal departments is that in-house counsel often end up functioning as the FAQ department. They're the information bureau for the entire organization. Anytime there's a question about, do we have an NDA with this vendor? Where's the signed version of this contract? We're doing a new order form for this customer. Where's the MSA? Where's the amendment that was made last year? And of course, really big questions that often come as a company is growing and is seeking financing or perhaps positioning itself for an IPO. Questions from the head of finance or outside investors. Find me all agreements with non-standard limitations of liability and similar questions. And the illustration here is the day-to-day work of in-house counsel in that situation where you're constantly pushing a rock up the hill, like Sisyphus, if you're familiar with that Greek myth. And the boulder keeps running back down every day, and you're pushing the boulder up every day. Ashlee, let me turn to you. Can you talk a little bit about, in your experience, what does this actually feel like? And what are the benefits of having an organized repository?
Yeah, I have to say that slide, and I've seen it a few times, always makes my heart race a little bit because I've been there. I've been in that seat of the stream of never-ending questions, and also in the seat of wanting to help, and then also in the seat of, is there a way out of this at all? Because I've just answered the same question 10 times today alone. Maybe last year it was like once a week I answered that question, but now for some reason I get them all the time. So that is a great analogy and it made me giggle. The reason why the rock rolls back down is because without some sort of step back and a bigger picture solution, you are the bot essentially that answers the questions over and over again.
Absolutely. When you've talked with legal ops teams and legal teams about why have a repository, how do you frame that for them? How do you sell that internally?
Yeah, that to me has been what I frame as a foundation. We have to know the universe of what's happening across our business. Without knowing the universe of just what is coming in, we can't really get to that next stage of growth, which is, okay, now we understand our universe. Is there maybe agreements that we can have a different playbook for? Like maybe this particular agreement doesn't even need legal's eyes on it, or gosh, there's a bunch of these. Maybe we should actually think about training contract ambassadors, so to speak, or experts and embed them in the business. That's where I see starting that sales process internally is really that internal story of where we could go if we're open to change. The answer is really clear when you're working on a team that's, we're not going to do this. It's really, how many people can I hire? Then the conversation shifts from, we're going to be scaling by adding to our team other roles, or maybe even looking at an outsource vendor that can mine all of our repositories for the endless sea of questions that come in.
Yeah. One of the things I hear a lot about from in-house counsel is their wish, their desire to be spending more time on more strategic work, on enabling the business more and getting out of the day-to-day answering questions that could be answered by giving access to folks to their contracts, right? Making it easy for everybody within the organization to be able to answer their own questions. And sometimes that's not possible within an organization. They want to restrict who has access to contracts, but if at least it's fast for even an administrator to be able to search a repository to find specific contracts, to be able to answer questions about contracts, that provides a lot of value to the legal team and the organization. That's tough to do unless you've got all your contracts in one place. You had a story, I think, to tell about your experience that I think you've called the pinnacle of your career.
Yes.
That involves working with this issue. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, the pinnacle of my career, I'm sure a lot of legal ops people can even anticipate what I'm about to say, but it really was at my last job, we had one CLM for the legal and the business teams that generated agreements. And that was the first time in my career that's happened. It's actually quite interesting when you look at companies and their contracting practices that one team will decide for this type of agreement, I want to buy something, we need this platform, and it has to be this special thing. And then, our revenue or our agreements, the world of inbound, outbound, for some reason gets split across two platforms. And so just to reloop, the pinnacle of my career was actually finding and implementing a tech stack where both of those experiences, along with the high volume, the NDAs, the marketing agreements, were all passing through the same CLM tech stack. And that feels good. It really did.
Yeah, because then the organization had all its contracts in one place. And that becomes really powerful when it comes to a legal department thinking more strategically and acting to really help build a business, because then you can actually start to understand what's in all your contracts. And with a lot of tools coming on the market now, you can interrogate your contracts. You can really find out, where are we deviating from our templates? And if we're negotiating with vendor paper, third-party paper, we can even ask questions about where are there issues in our contracts around liability that might not be what our standard practices, and how can we then improve that? Those are things that you need to have a repository for to be able to answer. Let's go to our next poll question on this and ask everyone, what do you think, what aspect of our contract repository would most significantly improve your team's efficiency?
The answer choices are a single source of truth, centralized and easy search, repurpose time to more valuable and strategic work. And then there's compliance, there's understanding what's in the contract, and improved collaboration with business stakeholders. While people are taking the poll, I want to give a shout out to the chat. I'm seeing some great stuff here. I'm not going to name names for the sake of the recording, but some comments include, to be clear, all over the place includes a CLM, because there's some stakeholders who don't use the CLM in the organization, even though it's there. I'm looking through, I see some interesting questions. We'll tackle that in a bit, but there's some good questions as well in the chat. So keep it coming, and great to see that. Great to see the interaction. Is there a reason why you use the term repository instead of CLM? That's an interesting question. What do you think, Martin?
Yeah, you raised two really interesting points. So a repository is a subset of a CLM, right? The CLM, there's obviously different products on the market, but in general, it means an end-to-end system that tends to handle the whole contract life cycle, from the initial intake, often document generation, obviously through review, negotiation, approval, signatures, and then uploading any signed contracts back to the repository. And there are tools on the market that provide essentially repository-only functionality. And of course, as many companies, as we saw in the earlier poll, that use cloud storage as their repository. And some maybe are even old school. It's a shared server in the office or in the cloud that functions as the repository. So that's the distinction.
Got it.
Quick comment on the earlier point, and I know Ashlee's got a lot to say on that earlier point about all over the place, and all over the place, including often there is a CLM, but not everything is in the CLM. So we'll definitely be talking more about that in a couple of minutes.
All right. So just to recap the poll, looks like a whopping 54% are the main aspect is centralized and easy search of contracts, which I think is super consistent with my experience and others. Over to you, Martin.
Sounds great. That's actually really interesting polling information. All right, let's move on to our second topic, which is the challenges involved in creating and managing contract repositories. Assuming that the legal department is sold, legal ops, if there's a legal ops function is sold, the company is sold, what then? And what are the things that are potential pitfalls and problems during this process of creating and managing your contract repository? And to introduce that topic, thought I would show what this actually looks like in practice for many organizations is that you're now entering the circles of repository creation hell. So starting from the limbo of unorganized contracts or contracts all over the place, the chaos of multiple sources, all the way down to the purgatory of change management once you have to train users and get the organization to potentially adopt some new process, and right down to the pit of cost and time and your sanity. And we've actually mapped those here to some the more specific activities that go on when you're creating a repository, starting by identifying all sources of those contracts, cleaning them up, preparing them for upload, dealing with data extraction, ultimately user training and change management. And one of the things we're going to touch on is what this looks like in reality in terms of how long it takes and how much it costs. So at the end of the circle of hell, there's hopefully a light where the organization can now answer questions about, here's the contract that you're asking me about. Ashlee, I know you've got a lot to say about this.
Yeah. Again, I'm also working on maintaining some calmness here because it's
triggering for you.
It is, yeah, but there are also glimmers of hope out there. And by the way, the 7% of you that want to understand what's in your contracts, gold stars for all of you, because that's really where it all ends. Like that previous slide was cute and fun, but it's real. And if you're in the role where you're the person that has to answer off the top of my head, your team needs to understand where the work is coming in, and you need to know how many contracts are coming in from this place versus this place, or this team versus this team. You're not going to be able to answer that without having some sort of technology. But when you go down the path of, and I don't know if you all heard this because I really want to reemphasize it, you have approval, there's a lot of work just to even get to this point of, yes, I'm doing the repository. Once that kicks off is locating and just finding all the documents. A lot of times this is handed off to somebody earlier in career or even an intern. I don't know why this is. It's actually quite sophisticated technology path that you have just taken a first step on. So please don't hand it off to earlier in career people. The other thing about creating and getting these things out the door is a lot of times it's seen as an afterthought. The exciting thing is if you don't have a CLM, we want a CLM, and let's get our CLM in, and then we'll deal with our contracts being everywhere, which I also love that approach because you're putting a hole there. But then going back and getting all of your previously executed agreements in your repository, if it even gets there, people lose steam a lot. But it's very common to have a CLM and still not have all your agreements in one place that are searchable, that can answer these questions. What is inside my contract? I
So
can go on, but
I,
I know
I
this is a conversation, so I don't want to dominate.
one of the things that we've talked about in terms of what you've come across in dealing with your clients is where people are starting from often. And we saw that in some of the polling information earlier, where it can really vary between organizations what they're doing today. And one of the ways you've described it is, 20% of the time you're dealing with an organization that is shockingly organized. And the other 80% of the time, they're completely disorganized. And that's not a comment on the people or even the organization. That's often the result of growth, of people coming into the organization at different times and trying to make things better.
Yeah.
But how, for somebody who's deal with that scenario where they're completely disorganized, how should they be looking at what to do next? And you've touched on some of those options already about often the instinct is to look to hand things off to an intern or a junior person. What else should that organization be thinking about when embarking on their repository creation journey?
Yeah, I would say always getting an assessment of your current state. What's happening today? Making friends with your IT folks, if that role is in your company, or whoever looks after the technology for sales and finance, they would be a great resource for you to start saying, what would it take to get all of our business agreements in one place, and what is that one place? So you not making that decision, but looking across at your partner organization teams to help. I think it is also prudent to leverage existing technology. So if you have G Drive available, or Teams, or there's a lot of cloud storage out there, Box, Dropbox, leveraging existing technology, in my opinion, seems to have gone over well, instead of going out to buy something just to house agreements. And I did touch on this before, that there is a perception that this is grunt work, and we just don't have the time today. That's probably its own webinar of why building a repository is actually quite sophisticated and needs someone that actually understands databases and querying. Like, how do you construct a database that you can get the information out that you actually want? Something as simple as, do I have an NDA? Can be hard if you don't trust your database, right? It's hard because you're like, it says I don't, but maybe I do.
That part I'm really excited about, because that's where there's a huge evolution in the technology that's now available, where the technology part of this is becoming easier. But the people side of this, the organizational management, the change management part of this, I know I've seen in action how much that's a problem. And I know you've lived that. Can you talk a little bit about that? And maybe what you encounter in terms of people's initial understanding of the work they're going to have to do versus what
For
that
real.
actually turns out to in real life.
Yeah, I have now. Admittedly, I was an early adopter in this whole kind of movement of electronic records, starting with, I think my first building of a repository was taking the paper files out of the legal cabinets. It was started there. So moving forward, around at some point in time, I think Seal Software comes to mind. I think they were purchased by DocuSign. I don't know their story, and this isn't about them, but I remember just having a glimmer of hope that this is what we need. This is what the industry needs. We have the technology available. By the way, I have an engineering background, so it's always been juxtaposed what we could do because it's available in the world versus what we have in the legal department and what we have in the way of legal tools. There's been a big gap there, and I see the gap is closing finally. Thankfully. Thank you, Martin, for helping with that. When you embark on these This is 10 plus years ago. We are getting Seal software. We're going to ingest all of our electronic files, and it's going to help me help my team answer questions about which things, what agreements are in play right now, like what are active, which ones are going to expire soon. Something as simple like that, which I think we do, a lot of the CLMs have figured out those reminders. But back then, dates are hard. It was really hard back then for a signature date, an effective date, just the date that the contract was created, for the technology to determine what those dates meant. And so that actually, what I was sold was this hands-off, it's going to ingest, it's going to take a few days for us, weeks for us to pull in all of your records, and then it's going to spit out all this information. And I went through with that company and said, this is what we want to track. What happened was, it was a lot of work, way more than I thought. Now, all of this tech does need human eyes. I haven't really seen anything yet that, and I think we could get there, just because nothing's 100%, right? There's always going to be some variances, some things that will get kicked out, but the scale in which the list of the technology, not a human or anything, but just the technology saying, we don't know what to do with this. The vendor was like, let's pull back your relevance. This thing you're looking for, because I was like, I want it to be like 90% relevant. And the answer was to make the relevance less, to make that issue list of, we don't know what to do with this record or how to catalog it, or we don't know what this date means. It made it even more. And so a lot of times what comes with these platforms is a lot of professional services. So that's a key. If you're out there shopping and looking, always ask about the pro services, because it can actually be surprisingly a lot more time and money, just because of that human aspect of the tech can get you in the house, but it can't solve all of your problems. You still have more work to do.
Yeah, I'm glad you raised that point, because that's something I see a lot. Often people who are creating their repository for the first time can underestimate how much effort, how long the duration of the effort, and the magnitude of the cost. And that often puts them in a position where they're moving along with the project, but it's not moving along on the timeline and budget that they originally set. And that's one of the things that then starts to cause some huge problems. And one of the factors where repository implementations fail, because people get discouraged, projects get shelved, or repository work only gets partially implemented. So only some of a company's contracts get in. Maybe often a decision will be made, okay, going forward, we'll put all our contracts in this repository, but that leaves all the historical contracts unaddressed.
Yeah, and a lot of times that the relationships get broken in that scenario, right?
Totally.
Like,
Yeah.
Going forward, we're going to have this new order form, but the order form is actually a child agreement of a master agreement that we never put in.
Exactly. And then you can imagine also the opposite scenario, where the decision is to focus first on historical contracts, and that process becomes unwieldy and far larger than was expected, and maybe eventually does get done. But now you're 9 months, 12 months down the road before the organization starts to see any value from what was originally intended. Let's move to our third poll question, which is, what is the state of your current contract repository?
All right. So is your state very organized, complete disaster, somewhere in the middle, or which repository? We have many. So far, one person has said that they're very organized. So kudos to that person out there.
I want to meet you.
I can.
Now we have two people. All right. And
They should be on the panel here.
They should be on the panel. Yeah.
seriously. And then we have four people who have say complete disaster, five people, complete disaster. Thank you for your honesty. The vast majority of people, 70%, are saying that it's somewhere in the middle. And then 20%, which repository? We have so many. This is fodder for a meme for me. So I appreciate the inspiration. And I just want to give a shout out to Ellen, who says, we need a full-time person dedicated to the implementation, not just somebody who is sidetracked by routine legal work. Otherwise, it will never be done. Sarah says, unfortunately, it's not where it should be. People in the company do not take time to learn how to use the platform, but we're almost there. So that's awesome. And yeah, we love all the honesty as well. So again, two people say very organized, 10% of the audience it says it's complete disaster, 67% somewhere in the middle, and 20%. We have lots of repositories. Back to you, Martin.
Yeah, that's a great point about needing a full-time person, and sometimes perhaps even more than a full-time person. And that's a great segue into how do you get from where you are to where you want to be. And a big shout out to Ashlee's cat, who's just made an appearance. We're in preparing here, we're talking about how YouTube got started with cat videos. I'm super happy that the cat made it into the webinar.
It's good luck.
Ashlee, I think I'm making you blush. Sorry. So let's talk about as an organization, you are where you are. Maybe you have some organization, you've got some prior attempts that have been made at a repository. Where do you go from here? So let's do it. Let's talk first, Ashlee, about a scenario where an organization has nothing. And by nothing here, there's no formal existing repository. There's a legal team, probably at a small but growing company, responsible for managing hundreds of contracts, primarily vendor agreements, maybe some customer agreements. And right now, those contracts, some of them are in the caves of email inboxes. Some of them might be on an attempt to organize things on a shared drive. There's probably lots of stuff stored on people's desktops or laptops. And so this team wants to implement a centralized contract repository. How do you think about what their next steps should be?
Yeah, you articulated some of that universe right there. And so bringing it all back to basics is getting an understanding of the universe, really just finding out as much as you can about, especially nowadays, like how does this contract, the only signed version we have, get on someone's laptop? The reason why I suggest that is because when you look at the universe, you have to start weighting in prioritizing. It could just be you happen to talk to someone that was on a flight or some random scenario, but you don't want that kind of getting in your thought process of, I'm going to pick a vendor that will solve for this very edge case. So that's what I'm saying. Talk to everybody you can about where these agreements are getting generated and stored, and really building a business case or a problem statement. There's a lot of, I think you guys even have a great template to share with people to help build that business case, showing traditional or the state of the tools in the market and where Recital is different. And again, partnering with IT, because what you don't want to do is get this kind of a rumor started that you're ripping out this whole thing that spent who knows hundreds of thousands of dollars on, but partnering with IT from the beginning. And then the taxonomy. So we haven't touched on this quite yet. And I used to think until my last client that I also had very organized repositories. And then I started to getting more or closer to the inner dialogue that anybody working on the agreement, maybe the commercial counsel or contracts manager. The reason why I'm bringing this to the taxonomy is because we spent a lot of time creating it was this fast growing company. They just merged with another company. And they're like, hey, we just need a standard process for how to file our agreements electronically, all the way down to the naming convention and the folder structure. And I used to think that just getting everything in one folder with the name of the counterparty was very organized until I met that legal team, and they said, no, without having technology assisted searching, it's just us searching. And how do we search? We go into all of our repositories and we start typing amendment for Pepsi, or you're just trying to get some sort of kind of natural language, like hopefully the file name reflects what the actual agreement is. So thinking through that taxonomy, and again, this is just you starting out on your path. What do you want your folder and sub-folder structure to be? Your legal team will thank you, because again, don't just get everything in one folder. There's much more to do. That was a lesson learned for me. And then really creating the standard operating procedures and communicating that to the business is, okay, it was a little fast and loose before, but we're a growing company. We're going to standardize on some processes. One process is, here's what to do with a contract after it's signed. And you articulate that. And it's probably like an email inbox. And again, it's a human taking it out of the email or Slack or wherever it got sent to you and filing it according to the taxonomy that you designed. All of this just to make it searchable for all the questions that you're going to get.
I'm glad you raised that, because that approach is a super common, I'll call it a workaround, but maybe that's not fair, super common approach to try to make things accessible, findable, searchable in the absence of some of the technology that is now available on the market. So I suppose I'm playing the role here of saying there's a better way than having to do all of that. But obviously, somebody who's taken the time to do that is at a great starting point, because it means they've got a pretty high level of organization when it comes to either creating or improving their repository capabilities. I want to touch on one issue that comes up a lot, and it's come up in the polling today, you've talked about it, is how to deal with a situation where there's in fact multiple repositories. And as you know, that can happen for a couple of reasons. One is a company's gone through some mergers or acquisitions. Another fairly common scenario is that just over time, there have been silos within the company about which department or which team handles different kinds of contracts. What are your thoughts about how to deal with that?
Yeah, that's been most of my career, honestly, until my last corporate job. First, you cry. No, I'm just kidding. Don't deal. Maybe you do have to cry. Let it out. It is more of a human, how do I say it? A human approach first. Always understanding, how did we get here? And so in that case of just two companies coming together, it's very easy to understand why there are at least two separate major contract repositories. And then moving on to really understanding the flow of how was that agreement getting generated? How is it getting out in the world? And that's the mindful touch, is because it could be you're embarking on something that's a little bigger than just improving your repository. You're trying to standardize something that was maybe not standardized, or you're trying to centralize something that was disparate. And so that's why I do operations and wellness. That's where the wellness piece comes in. So you can really pull those folks aside and really say, like, this is, is this something you even want to be doing? First of all, a lot of times it's known, but nobody at the company was doing it, and I thought it should be done. It's showing up that you're here to help with that now, I think can actually create a lot of wins. And people that were like, yeah, I my previous job, our repository was a mess. When you find people at your company that are organized, it's probably because they had the inverse, or they've had that experience where their strategy was to stop day-to-day business, and everybody had to do 50 files. Security breach, that comes to mind. Oh, there's something happened. Do we have to send notice? We're going to shut down our commercial legal department, and we're going to give everybody on the team 50, 100, 200 contracts to look at manually, and that's their strategy. So it's really overcoming and understanding people's resistance. And I would say more mindfully, it's probably not a resistance, it's probably just the result of the way it's been. And so showing people an approach of, hey, we can make this easier for you. We're going to standardize on the way we file things, the way we name them, and that hopefully will win you some cred among your colleagues.
Absolutely. Yeah. So one of the things I think we've talked throughout the webinar about is the human and organizational side of creating or improving the repository situation. And I think that's a super important, as much as the technological side is important. That's a great segue into our next discussion point, which is a quick introduction and demo of Recital. And as I move to that, Ashlee, maybe you can comment a little bit about how to think about approaching vendors, speaking with vendors, and also this is the point where you're going to start to ask me some tough questions during the demo or after the demo.
Yeah, so I always try to approach things, especially with if you have a current vendor that never shared any sort of AI story and they are now, dig into that, find out what's going on. Changing CLM in particular, that full stack is probably one of the most complex business flows at the company. That's your quote to cash. If any of you have ever heard that phrase, that's really the revenue side or your outbound contracting experience. And then the procure to pay is your inbound or your purchasing. Just know why, if you're thinking about changing, why are you shopping for a solution? And really know what tools do people want to work in. So this is, again, probably the third time I'm saying it, like the current state. You have a team of contract lawyers and managers. Guess what they like to work in? They like to work in email and Word. So just the sooner you can accept that, the better your life will be. Yeah, but I'm sure everybody wants to see the demo, not hear me go on and on.
Nope, that's a fantastic introduction. And I'm going to focus the demo of Recital today on the repository and more specifically on what we're calling the auto repository capabilities. But you talked about something that's near and dear to my heart there, which is lawyers like to work in Word and in email, or more generally, they like to work in the tools they already know and that they already use day to day. So at a high level, Recital is focused on solving the problem here, which is where the fuck is my stuff? Where's the version that I need? Where's the last version that I reviewed? I need a red line, and I want that red line without having to navigate through 24 directories on SharePoint. I know I have a clause from a deal I worked on last year, and I probably remember the name of the deal, but now I can't find that clause. So that's what we're focused on. And we'll see in a moment, Recital can automatically create your repository, but Recital does a lot more than that. It accelerates your contract review with really fast red lines directly from email. It automates version control, and it provides clause suggestions directly in Word as you review contracts. And as I say, does all of this as much as possible working in the tools that in-house counsel already use. So actually, I missed a step here. Let me share a different screen.
You got a lot of people noticed how much you care, Martin, with your where the heck is my stuff?
We didn't lose half of the audience there.
Big drop off. No.
All right. So while perfect. Martin is teeing up. All right. You ready, Martin? If anybody wants to donate to our GoFundMe for the fine, we're going to get. Just kidding. Just kidding. Over to you, Martin.
All right, so we're looking at a Recital account that's just been created, and we can see there's nothing in the account right now. So just to prove that, nothing that's in negotiation, nothing that's executed. And what I'm going to show here is how I can easily connect cloud storage and how that's going to actually create my repository. So I've just connected my G drive. And with Recital, I can connect, here in this case, I'm showing G drive, but so you know, you can connect SharePoint, you can connect OneDrive, you can connect Box, Dropbox, any of the major cloud storage providers. And within a cloud storage provider, you can pick the folders that you want Recital to process, look for contracts, and bring them into your repository. So here for the simple demo, I'm going to pick a contracts folder. I'm going to click and add files. So that has now started Recital to go through that folder in my cloud storage and scan and process those documents to recognize contracts, to be able to deduplicate contracts. We're able to find signed contracts. And super importantly, we're able to map parent-child relationships. So if there are master agreements in your contracts, we can actually find any order forms or amendments that belong with that. And we already
That's
see some
amazing.
records appearing here. One of the things I'll quickly mention as this continues to process is we can also find contracts from your email account. And that's super unique to Recital. It means that you don't have to worry about contracts getting lost in email inboxes. Or maybe if historically there are contracts lost in your email boxes, we can actually find them and bring them into your repository. So let's look as Recital keeps processing here. So we've got an agreement here. This is an in-flight agreement, so this is not yet signed. And you can see Recital has recognized that these documents, these are Word documents, are all versions of the same contract. And it's not doing that using a file naming convention. It's doing that electronically by actually detecting that these documents are versions based on the same parties and based on other factors in the document itself. And you can see Recital also tells you where it found that document. So here it found that document in my G drive. If we connected other cloud storage or email inboxes, Recital would also pinpoint other locations where that same document could be found. And just to highlight really quickly some of the comparison functionality, lots of tools on the market do comparisons, including Microsoft Word. The magic of Recital is not that it provides comparisons, it's that it does so quickly without having to navigate file directories. And so what we were seeing here, you could even get directly from Outlook or Gmail. Let's go back to what Recital is processing here. So we can see there's more agreements that are coming in. And we can see some of them have got this green check mark. That means Recital has detected that those are fully executed agreements. So let's have a look. We can see.
Did I hear you say it's going to detect the parent and child agreements at this point?
Yes.
Not you have to go back and link it after the fact?
Thanks for raising that. You're stealing my thunder.
Oh, sorry.
But I love it
I'm like,
here.
did I hear you say that? Just want to make sure I
Absolutely.
heard that.
Absolutely. And that's very unique. Most, as far as I'm aware, there is no technology on the market that really does this today. This is normally done with manual effort. And in many cases, it's done after you've already imported your contracts into a repository or into a CLM. There's effort required to then map master agreements with order forms, with amendments, and so forth.
Yeah, and there's a question wanting to know if your technology works based on that file naming convention. So do I have to have a file name that is indicative of a relationship to another agreement?
No, that's
No.
a great
Okay.
question.
Wow.
None of our technology depends on file naming conventions. It is in some cases one of the signals that we look to, but we're doing, without getting into real technical details, we're using some pretty advanced artificial intelligence and some other proprietary algorithms to be able to do this kind of matching. So to recognize that contracts belong to the same, that contract versions belong to the same contract, and also to map parent and child records. So we're looking at a master agreement here. I could open this up in PDF, and Recital has detected that it's fully signed. Recital has also extracted some key clauses, which then is going to enable some pretty powerful reporting capability. Recital has extracted the effective date. Obviously, we've extracted the document name, we've extracted the party name, and back to the parent-child relationships, Recital has recognized that there's an order form that is subject to this master agreement. So I can go to that order form in one click and see that I have that here. It was signed. I can see when it was signed. And again, we're extracting the effective date. Recital also looks to extract a standard set of clauses from all the contracts that we find. And in this case, it only found a renewal provision because most of the provisions are actually in the master agreement, not the order form. And again, here I can navigate easily back to the master agreement.
This is amazing. This is like months and months of work that we've done in this webinar in 3 minutes. I feel a little emotional. It's really cool.
I'm mindful of time here. We're at the hour, but why don't we open it up to questions? And I might need some help from Shai and others just to make sure we touch on questions that I may have missed. And I'll just say, Shai, I'm open to speaking with anyone after if there's more questions that we don't get to right now.
All right. Thank you. And thank you, Martin and Ashlee, for a wonderful program so far. Lots of questions in the chat. And I just want to make clear. So Ellen is asking, what if the file name just says standard MSA, no name, no date? It can still recognize that it's part of a series or there's an amendment, it's part of the same family of contracts?
That's correct, because we're not relying on just the file name. We're actually digitally looking at the parties in the agreement and the dates in the agreement and other information in the agreement to be able to do that matching.
All right. Are there any due diligence M&A use cases? So that's an interesting one, right? If there's I guess, an acquisition target, they got to get all their contracts together. Can Recital just swoop in and organize all their contracts?
That's not a typical use case that we've done, but we'd be happy to chat about that. Usually the scenario for using Recital is create your repository and use Recital to accelerate your contract review process and your drafting process.
All right, great. Do documents need to be in a certain format? If they're DocuSign in a PDF, will Recital be able to detect the clauses and analyze, such as OCR?
Yes, is the short answer. So yes, we deal with any Word documents. We deal with PDFs. We deal with e-signed documents to be able to recognize e-signatures. We also can recognize wet signatures on documents. There's one little caveat here that if you're importing documents that are scans of fax documents from 40 years ago that were faxed back and forth 10 times to get all the signatures, we're going to try to OCR that, and we're going to try electronically here to extract all the information, but that may not succeed if that's one of the things that you're dealing with.
That's an edge case too.
It is, but we've come across it very quickly. We've got different levels of packages to deal with auto creating your repository. What we're seeing here is our standard package, But if a company has got more sophisticated needs that do involve looking back at scanned contracts, we can deal with that. And that's typically where we would offer some professional services as well.
Does Recital keep updating automatically once it's set up? Is it like auto scan, or is it you have to keep doing it?
Fantastic question. The answer is yes. And we can see here that I've got contracts that are marked executed. Recital's also tracking my in-flight contracts. And of course, the premise here is that I'm using Recital as I'm negotiating a contract, automatically creating a version history. I can get easy comparisons. And when this contract is signed with DocuSign or with wet signatures, Recital will self-update the repository. So this record will automatically move to be an executed contract.
Love it. We have more questions, and this is super cool. And keep the questions coming. I guess I didn't even have to say. Somebody just did it. So I'll skip to that question because it's relevant. What's the accuracy rate? Is it like is it accurate? Is it accurately combining the right contracts?
Yeah, I feel like Ashlee is the one who cheated and put that into the chat. Here's how we think about accuracy and making some distinctions between what's achievable digitally by Recital versus what's achievable in combination with human effort. So again, the standard package that I'm demoing here, we're achieving 99%, in some cases 100% accuracy for some of the data extraction. For many of the clauses that we're extracting, that accuracy is more at about 80% right now. We're continuing to improve that week by week, and we're shooting ultimately for a target of 92 to 95% accuracy. Let me add very quickly that we have more advanced packages. So one advanced package is providing more processing time than our standard package, and that improves the accuracy to 92 to 95%. Again, we're trying to drive that down to be part of our standard package. And lastly, this might especially be the case for a larger organization that's got years of historical contracts to import and where they might be deeply concerned about very high accuracy. We can provide a professional services package that, in addition to the digital work that we do for repository creation, provides human review and human quality control to achieve 99% plus accuracy across the board.
More questions keep coming in, so we're going to keep going. Okay, so can Recital detect what contracts have alternate/negotiated clauses that are different from the company's standard clauses? Is that unique to Recital or usual to CLMs?
Let me take those questions one at a time. That's where we're going with this product. Very much on the roadmap is the ability to interrogate all of your contracts, your executed contracts, and your in-flight contracts, to be able to answer questions like, show me all my contracts with a non-standard limitation of liability. That is not yet in the product today, but that's on our midterm roadmap. And you can see here, there's an export CSV button. I'm not going to click on that right now, but that's the start of that kind of capability where I can do a search of my repository. Some examples of various things you can search by, but it will shortly include searching for terms that are different from my standard template, and then be able to export that, both in the sense of getting a report in Excel and also actually export the specific documents if that's what you want.
Awesome. All right, we have a few more questions, but folks, if you have more questions, please let us know. All right, what about other languages? Is it just English right now? Is additional languages on the roadmap?
So the interface right now is just in English. It's on our long-term roadmap to deal with the interface being available in different languages. In terms of processing contracts, we have some data that indicates that we can deal with other languages. And that would be something I'd want to speak to the person who's asking directly, just to understand what languages and what are the specific use cases they're dealing with.
All right. Two more questions, unless somebody chimes in with more. Can the platform track attorney-client privilege status of draft agreements?
Of draft agreements?
Yeah, attorney-client privilege status of draft agreements. Yeah.
Yeah, I think if I'm understanding the question correctly, the question is may also be about access and permissions to Recital. So how Recital works right now is it piggybacks on the permissions of the legal team and the organization. So to access Recital, you use your regular Microsoft credentials or your regular Google credentials. And that's how access is governed. In other words, you can't access and see anything in Recital unless you've got permissions to the underlying cloud storage.
Last question, and it's the $64,000 question. A few people have asked this, but I'm going to ask it straight out.
Go for it.
Yeah, what's the payment structure? What do the fees look like? What's the subscription? Is there any free trial? I see there's definitely a few people in the audience who are interested in a free trial. I'm not sure how that works. Kurt is on it, but for people who are curious, what's it cost to get set up with Recital and all of that good stuff?
Yeah, so our pricing ranges from a 5,000 to 25,000 a year, and that's for legal departments from a solo general counsel all the way to a team of 10 people. We've got some different pricing for larger organizations, and within that pricing, that includes the auto repository creation with a big asterisk that obviously we want to understand the volumes of documents to be processed as part of that. But essentially, our pricing is intended to be very accessible for smaller teams, 1 to 10 people. And we've also got some much larger customers where obviously the pricing looks a little bit different depending on their needs.
All right.
And I want to make sure I touch on the free trial question.
There we go.
In principle, what we do is we offer a money back guarantee. So if a customer is not satisfied with Recital, they can get their money back after 60 days. We don't do full out free trials. This is the consequence of that. What we can do is do small tests. For example, if a company wanted to test here, I've got 100 sample contracts and I want to see what that would look like when it's uploaded to the Recital repository. That's the kind of engagement that we do consider on a case-by-case basis.
All right. Wonderful. We're going to wrap up here. But before we wrap up, I want to kick it back to Ashlee and Martin for final remarks. Martin, you've got a chance to answer a lot of questions. I'll kick it to Ashlee for final remarks, and then we'll close out with you, and we go from there. Does that sound good?
Yeah, I really don't think, based on what I've seen, that there's a tool on the market that can do that auto repository. I feel like I would have found it. It would have made me a happier legal ops professional. So thank you, Recital, just for understanding kind of the inner dialogue that goes on when it's your turn to review the contract, and understanding that the repository is so foundational to the tech stack. So I probably should have addressed that to the audience, but I just want to say thank you, Martin, and your team.
Thanks, Ashlee. Really appreciate that. And obviously, I want to give a shout out to the team because I'm just here as the face talking and clicking buttons, but there's a ton of work that's gone on to solve some really difficult technical problems and to make that work in a way that's easy to use for lawyers. And I think that's super important for technology. There's too much historical technology in the legal tech world that has got fantastic promise, but is actually not usable by the lawyers who are negotiating contracts. And that's core to what we do at Recital. Shai, thank you so much for hosting us. And to the audience, thanks so much for joining us. Really appreciate your time and really appreciate all your questions. If for some reason we didn't get to your question, please feel free to get in touch with us directly.
All right. Thank you so much, Martin, Ashlee, Recital. I want to close off by echoing what Nir just said. Our repository is only as good as what you put in it. Love that. So we'll leave it here. Thank you again, Recital. Very cool stuff. Excited to see the growth of your company and more. Thank you for that. Thanks everybody for tuning in. Wonderful, great chat box. Thank you for the questions and the networking. Loved it. Thanks everybody. Take care. Have a great Thursday and a great weekend.